Hi guys, welcome back to The Social Tune, and a brand new episode of Record Roundup, this time for March 2024. This doesn't seem right. What the fuck happened? So I started reading the script I'd written for this video and then realized that I was using an older version from last month. I don't know why I'm admitting that on camera, but hey, welcome back to this well-oiled machine. So far, 2024 has been on a bit of a weird track, with quite a lot of great music, but very little that would approach transcendence until this month, where it seems the floodgates just broke open and we suddenly got some of the best music that I think we're gonna get this year. We'll have to see in the long run, but for now...
We could see the sadness as a gift and still feel too heavy to hold.
One of the most praised artists currently working in music burst back onto the scene this year after 4 years, barring a 2022 album with Big Thief, and she's still turning heads. I primarily remember her for how obsessed I know that my friend VERTIGO used to be with her last album's songs, and while I'll admit I was late to the party, I'm so glad to finally be on board. If you're a fan of folk and country with a nice little touch of psychedelia, as well as songwriting that is nakedly vulnerable, you will absolutely love this. And speaking of front people striking out on their own,
we saw the same asylum.
Anamoe Drive is the pseudonym of Dublin's own Oisin Furlong, former frontman of the band Thumper, who I was actually turned on to thanks to a recommendation from a friend. Thanks, Richie. And yeah, it's pretty damn great. A breakup album where he goes through the stages of grief in this really weird and progressive soundscape, ironically reminding me a bit of Big Thief in some ways. But the writing is uniquely his own, especially in how he can pull so much meaning out of small gestures of kindness and eventually closure. This will be one of the most slept on albums of this year. Please give it a chance. From the singles, I had a feeling that this was going to be Bleachers' long-awaited return to form since their debut, having put out a lot of good, but not necessarily great albums over the past decade. And boy was I right. The album is lush, experimental, gorgeous, frequently ridiculous to the point of almost seeming like dad rock, and yet while it's flitting in between those bombastic horns and the fluttering little synths, it always manages to be so catchy. Seriously, this has some of Jack's best hooks in years. And while I don't know if it's quite as good as their 2014 debut Strange Desire, it's easily the closest they've come to recapturing that magic in about a decade.
Blues got me down, I'm dragging on. My baby's not here with me, might as well be dead and gone.
Mainstream country hasn't successfully pushed a trio of women like this since the Chicks, but here, the Castellows reminded me exactly why we need more acts like them on the charts. Eleanor, Lily, and Powell Balcom, I'm really sorry, are from Georgia, and fun fact, 2 of them are triplets and 1 of them is not. Just wrap your head around that one. And they are bringing their own brand of neo-traditional country with pretty fantastic songwriting to the forefront, and to put it plainly, I absolutely adore it. It reminds me quietly of Jamie Wyatt's debut from 2017, a short 7-song project without an inch of fat on it, where one song happens to be a great cover, and every single hook absolutely slaps. The project may be short, but not a moment is wasted, where even the Band of Heathens cover Hurricane is made entirely their own, and their vocal chemistry is immaculate, both melodically and expressively, not to mention the fucking harmonies. And considering the swell of support I've seen for these women online, who knows, they could be the next big thing in country music. A couple of months ago, I said that a buddy of mine had filmed the music video for Lover's Leap, when in fact it was actually for Balu, my bad. Either way, the singles to this album all had me really excited, as it seemed that Elbow was getting weirder than ever with an album inspired by African rhythms, late Beatlesy glam, and lyrics that were more darkly humorous than ever. And after hearing the full project, dear lords is this wild. Every single song feels like a self-contained, sardonic anecdote, backed by instrumentation that is frequently raw and untamed, flitting between full orchestras and otherworldly synths, and not even held back by traditional song structures half the time. It's easy to see why some fans are calling it their best album in years, and while I think I need a bit more time before proclaiming that, the potential is clearly here. I've been an Everything Everything fan since Get to Heaven in 2015. All culminating in their last album, Raw Data Feel, being my second favourite album of 2022, right behind the Forever Story by Jid, by the way. So with very high expectations, I approached this with some trepidation, and I really needn't have. Because whether or not this is better than Raw Data Feel, it blew past all of my expectations regardless. I mean, purely in concept, this is aiming far higher. An existential and frequently pretty bleak look into our future, where Earth's residents are all building a mountain up to the heavens, while their overlords and masters who profit off of their work don't give a shit about their well-being, all with the sneaking suspicion that even though they're the ones doing the hard work, they will never fully profit. Sound familiar? It's a black mirror to capitalism that Everything Everything has employed before, but here the imagery, the hooks, the songwriting, the concept is larger than life. Where I genuinely struggled to pick a favorite song because it changes on every single listen. It does have that in common with Raw Data Feel for me, and that's only a good thing. In other words, this was one of my most anticipated albums of 2024, and I'm still fucking floored by it. Judas Priest make their return after recapturing everybody's hearts on Firepower 6 years ago, and goddamn, to all you Metallica fans out there, why would you support them when these guys are continuously putting out great music without a single moment of slippage? Rob Halford is 72, and yet he still delivers the hooks here like he's in his 30s, with songwriting that has remained consistent, so nothing groundbreaking, but very true to what it's always been, and their hooks and especially the solos go off. I genuinely can't think of another band from this era that has remained this consistent. And considering that I still kick myself to this day for not proclaiming Firepower as one of the best albums of 2018, I am not gonna miss the chance to praise this here. Julia Holter's another act that I've been a fan of for almost a decade now, and with Aviary having come out 6 years ago now, I approached this with a similar amount of trepidation, that is until I heard the lead-off single Spinning and I knew it would be great. Because Julia doesn't just rely on her gorgeous vocals, quickly proving herself plenty experimental and playful. God, my voice is dying, but keep watching to see how bad it gets together. With an off-kilter and dynamic sonic palette that blends electronic and organic tones together, with haunting backing vocals that fade in and out of earshot, all while maintaining the core melodies with Julia at the center, bending the mix around her to her will, much like Sampha did last year on his phenomenal album. It's frankly just gorgeous, and while it can get a little bit heady and even overwhelming at points, as some of the songs do go long, at only 10 tracks, Julia also shows a level of restraint that a lot of other artists could definitely benefit from having. Incidentally, no, Cowboy Carter is not on this list. Kenny Mason has got to be one of the most interesting artists working in rap music at the moment, and even though this isn't necessarily the best thing he's put out, Angelic Hoodrat is still the peak for me. I'm tired of seeing his hard work get overlooked, so I'm going to talk about him here. Because 9 is another solid showcase of everything that this guy is about, blending rap with rock elements that rarely go together this seamlessly, pushing the genre bending to its absolute limits, and proving that he's more than just a casual listener of both of them. Do I wish the content and the lyricism got the same level of attention and care as the production? Sure. But with just a little bit of extra refinery, I think this guy could be huge. Plus, he's responsible for the hook on Jid's Dance Now. That alone should get him a free pass into the big leagues.
Everything. The Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the Americans.
More Mother has not released a bad project, and ever since 2020's Brass, people have finally been paying closer attention. And while I'd argue this isn't nearly as incredible, More Mother is just one of the most expressive and talented singer-songwriters working today, all across a backdrop of hip-hop, jazz, and industrial elements, where the title of the album really does say it all, as the lyrics deal with the long and sordid history between Europe and Africa, and all the pain and misery involved. And as someone who grew up in Belgium, I can tell you they do not teach this in schools. And considering everything that country has done, especially in the Congo, they really fucking should. So yeah, if you want to learn a bit, and you should, this is a chilling, haunting, and devastatingly essential reminder. And on a very different note...
Death metal, the metal of death. Better drink that margarita before your last breath.
After their last album, The Prophecy, I will admit that Ninja Sex Party had forever moved the goalposts. If Cool Patrol was a moment of sheer excellence, where everything that they'd been working on for years finally clicked with the appropriate budget, their last album perfected it, which is why it's still among my top 10 albums of 2020. But while I knew that These Nuts probably wasn't going to match it, based on the lead-off singles, I still knew I was going to have a ton of fun with this. And yeah, while it is a step down, it's still pretty great. And I'd like to emphasize that I think that's also by design. For one, the scope of this album is much smaller, there's no 8-minute opuses, and I do think that the construction of this album as a whole feels a tad rushed. But they're busy guys, and the songs they did put the extra bit of effort into are stunning. I've already highlighted Let's Save the Earth as one of my favorite songs of 2023, and Sports Anthem might just be one of their funniest interludes in years, but adding phenomenal standouts like the opening track and Dance Till You Stop and Galaxy Hamster, I'm not even sure if I could pick a favorite right at this moment as I'm recording this. That combined with a shorter runtime makes the album feel like a bit of an amalgamation of old and new, with some of the humor and charm of their old, slightly less refined albums, except with a noticeably bigger budget. It might not work for everyone, but the high points guarantee that I'll be coming back to it.
Probably shouldn't walk where I walk, nigga. Socked out. Watch the way you talking when you talk, nigga.
Schoolboy Q appears to have been having a bit of an identity crisis in the last few years. Ever since 2016's Blank Face, which I did not give enough credit to when it dropped, his output has been floundering between incredibly killer guest verses and very lackluster projects of his own. So I was kind of hoping he would finally do some soul searching and bring that same wild energy that he brings to other people's projects to his own. And that brings us to Blue Lips, which is comfortably Schoolboy's most experimental and possibly his best album to date. The album is fucking crazy, going back and forth between introspection and bangers, with a wealth of phenomenal guest verses between Absol, Freddie Gibbs, and even Rico Nasty giving everyone a run for their money, and Schoolboy himself is in top form. Not only because of his iconic delivery, but with multiple flows sometimes on the one song. Thank God For Me is especially ridiculous in that aspect, all accompanied with phenomenal beat switches, and really cutting imagery on the more introspective tracks like Foo and Blue Slides. Pair all that with hook after hook that just goes off. And I barely noticed the runtime with how goddamn entertained I was. And at 18 tracks, especially with other long projects to compare it to, that is damn impressive that he kept my attention throughout.
You give me butterflies, got me falling in the deep end of your disguise.
And finally, while Ariana's fanbase were absolutely losing their minds over Eternal Sunshine, a lot of people missed the other gorgeous voiced singer who dropped an album over the last couple of weeks, and it's Tyla, the girl behind Water. And while I wasn't sure if she could actually nail an entire project with that same vibe, I'm happy to report that she definitely did. Despite the vibes that Tyla's trying to capture here being very much the same ones as on Water, hypersensual, smooth, and produced like a dream, the album just flows too well not to appreciate it, even with some tracks that can run together. And occasionally she will really surprise you, like on the Thames collab Number 1, or the multi-string swell and reverb on Butterflies, or the best use of Gunna since Fuck You Mean. In other words, if you liked Water, you'll like this album, and as a lover of both, I highly recommend it. So that was 13 albums released in March. Jesus. Oh, and we're not done yet. On to the tracks.
He wants a one-night stand. I want a life full of nights with him.
Adine the Artist is just the treasure that keeps on giving. Crowdfunding money well spent. The fact that this still hasn't been made into a single is fucking nuts. I'm late to this by a couple of months, but it's not very often that I have the urge to promote Dutch-speaking music, and this kicks all amounts of gunt.
I drank
Chris Young may be formulaic, but this is one of the best hooks that I've heard in this format in years. Not even Lil Yachty is immune to the Fred Again glow up. Fucking gorgeous.
Cause I know you're poison, you're feeding me poison. Addicted to this feeling, I can't help but swallow.
Congrats to Has Been Hotel for giving me my first song of 2024 that reduced me to a little blubbering mess. Also watch Has Been Hotel. It's awesome.
You're too sweet for me.
I don't care what your tastes are. If you say that you're not even a little bit attracted to Hozier, you're lying. I wasn't wild about the album, but this gorgeous little tune still gives me hope she's got another classic in her.
Out in London, Lord, I'll just piss into the pool. If I make a couple children with some women, and I'm cool.
Even Kojak's deluxe tracks go harder than almost anything else out right now. Another year, another example of why Liana Firestone is one of the best voices working in modern pop music. Give her her dues!
It's all about timing.
After Ceilings' huge success last year, it's nice to see that Lizzie McAlpine still has the ability to rip my fucking heart out.
And I can't help but feel
Echo moving in slow motion.
Brockhampton meets Blackpink, and it works way better than it should. Why is this so beautiful?
I'll live my life in psychos.
Despite Moncrief frequently getting compared to Dermot Kennedy and Cian Ducrot, he's consistently proven that he can write and sing circles around them. Plus he's a fair bit more ambitious. Put some respect on my man's name.
nobody knows me like you do.
Maybe this is a product of my latent love for Hours and Hours, as well as Instagram just shoving this down my throat repeatedly over the last month, but fuck do I love the sound of this woman's voice.
He was a wild god searching for what all wild gods are searching for.
Oh hell yes, this dropped right after I finished season 2 of Peaky Blinders, and I am so ready for a new Bad Seeds album.
But I'm so scared of my guitar.
Dear God, this girl is a blessing to music. I adore Obsessed too, by the way, but can we please get this on the charts instead of So American or Stranger? Oh, and speaking of Obsessed and guitars,
You treat me like a lesson, treat me like a test.
I am obsessed with how wonderful the guitars sound on this. That album can't come fast enough.
Baby, you're my slow dance to Whitley in the kitchen.
Scotty McCreery has continuously put out quality for over a decade now, and the fact he doesn't have more hits under his belt is frankly a crime.
Life's better on Saturn, not to break this pattern.
Nice to see that SOS wasn't a one-off. Guess I finally have to start calling myself a SZA fan now.
Give me something to believe.
Shout out to Kumarai Fang for recommending this awesomeness. I was kind of torn between highlighting this or Que Mas Quieres, but the fuzzy guitars and existential lyrics just barely edged this one ahead. Definitely an act to keep an eye on in 2024.